Before we had a word for love, danger, or home, we already had families, hunts, funerals, and trade routes. Entire societies ran for hundreds of thousands of years without a single spoken word passing between two mouths. So how did anyone tell someone else, there's a predator behind you, or I love this child, without language as we understand it today? The answer sits in your hands, your face, and sounds you probably still make without noticing you're making them. Start with the timeline, because it upends what most people assume walking into this topic. Modern speech, the kind requiring a lowered larynx, a reshaped vocal tract, and the fine motor control needed to produce a full range of distinct sounds, only became biologically possible fairly recently in our evolutionary history. Homo sapiens likely switched to speech as its primary means of communication only around 100,000 years ago, and some researchers push that figure later, closer to 100,000 to 150,000 years ago, tied to when anatomically modern humans first appeared. Our genus, Homo, has existed for roughly 2 million years. Run the math, and something becomes obvious immediately. For close to 95% of the time our genus has walked this planet, nobody spoke a sentence. And yet those same ancestors built tools, cared for the sick, coordinated hunts across dozens of individuals, and passed down knowledge across generations who never heard a single spoken instruction. Something carried all of that weight before words existed to carry it. That something was almost certainly the hands. Studies of modern primates show that hand movements and facial expressions operate with far more flexibility and intent than vocal calls do. A monkey's alarm call stays fixed, one sound tied permanently to one meaning, produced identically every time regardless of context or audience. A chimpanzee's gesture works completely differently. Researchers studying ape communication have found that gestures get produced flexibly and deliberately, adjusted on the spot to fit a specific listener, a specific situation, a specific goal the signaler has in mind. Researcher Michael Corballis put this shift starkly. Around 2 million years ago, alongside the growing brain size of the genus Homo, hand gestures became fully syntactic. Syntactic means structured, rule-governed, capable of combining simple elements into more complex layered meaning. That's the exact property that makes modern spoken language what it is. Long before any sound carried that kind of internal structure, hands already did. Think about what a hunt actually required, and the logic behind gesture-first communication becomes obvious fast. Chasing down large, fast, dangerous animals across open terrain demanded total silence at the exact moments that mattered most. One shout at the wrong second scatters prey and ends the hunt before it starts. A raised hand, a specific finger pattern, a tilt of the head toward movement in the grass carries the same information without a single sound reaching the animal's ears. Early humans likely used hand signs to convey exact meaning, especially while hunting, when silence itself stood between the group and going hungry that night. Every successful hunt depended on coordination that speech, had it existed yet, would have actively ruined. The body carried its own vocabulary too, running alongside deliberate hand signs the entire time. Vocalizations, facial expressions, and body movements served as some of the earliest tools for signaling danger, dominance, or affection between individuals. A wide-eyed stare paired with a frozen posture meant something specific to everyone nearby, instantly, with no translation required. A crouched, submissive posture near a dominant group member diffused conflict before it ever started. A soft touch, a lowered brow, a slow blink directed at an infant likely carried the same emotional weight then that it carries now in any nursery on earth. None of this required a shared vocabulary invented from scratch by committee. It ran on instinct wired straight into the body, refined slightly generation by generation, but never built whole from nothing the way a constructed language gets built today. Sound didn't disappear from this picture either, and it likely never took a full back seat to gesture at any point. Vocalized grunts and squeals almost certainly punctuated early gestural communication, the same way gestures still punctuate spoken language today, whether or not you notice yourself doing it mid-conversation. A sharp exhale paired with a specific hand motion could signal urgency. A rising pitch alongside an open, upturned palm could signal reassurance instead. Communication likely ran through both channels at once from very early on. Hands carrying structure and precision. Voice carrying urgency and emotional tone. Each channel reinforcing the other, rather than one simply waiting around to replace the other. Consider, too, how this same pattern shows up independent of any single origin story. Across cultures separated by oceans and tens of thousands of years, deaf communities that have never had contact with each other have, on separate occasions, spontaneously built full sign languages from scratch. Children in a Nicaraguan school for the deaf, given no formal sign system at all in the 1980s, invented one collectively within a single generation, complete with its own grammar that none of the adults around them had taught them. That single case tells you gesture-based language isn't a historical accident locked in our deep past. It's a default setting the human brain reaches for the instant speech isn't available. Proof that the underlying capacity for structured grammatical communication through the hands never left us. Even after speech took over as the default channel for almost everyone, the transition towards speech, when it finally arrived, wasn't a single invention or a lightning bolt moment shared across the species overnight. It required real biological retooling spread across tens of thousands of years. Producing modern speech sounds needed a repositioned larynx sitting lower in the throat than in any other primate, a reshaped vocal tract capable of forming distinct vowel sounds, and far greater voluntary control over the tongue and lips than any ape possesses today. Alongside these physical changes, the brain itself had to shift in parallel. The expansion of Broca's area and Wernicke's area, the regions responsible for producing and understanding speech, points to a cognitive shift running right alongside the physical one, not trailing behind it. One gene offers a strikingly specific marker for this transition. FOXP2 controls the fine facial and mouth motor abilities necessary for fluent speech, and damage to this gene in modern humans causes an inability to speak while leaving most other cognitive abilities completely intact. The specific human version of this gene became fixed in our species roughly 200,000 years ago, a date that lines up closely with the broader window researchers propose for when speech itself first began taking hold as a dominant mode of communication. Here's what makes this whole story stranger than it first appears. Gesture never actually disappeared once speech arrived on the scene. It stuck around, layered underneath spoken language, rather than replaced by it outright. Watch any two people deep in conversation anywhere in the world, and hands keep moving constantly, shaping the air, tracing shapes, pointing, emphasizing a point, even during a phone call where nobody on the other end can see the gesture at all. Some researchers argue gesture isn't just an accessory riding along with speech, an afterthought bolted onto the real language happening in the mouth. It might be the load-bearing structure language first evolved on top of, described in one memorable phrase as the remains of the unicycle on which language first evolved, with spoken sound arriving later as an additional wheel rather than a full replacement for the original mechanism. Modern sign languages prove just how far gesture alone can carry a complete language system, without a single spoken sound involved anywhere in the exchange. Linguists studying American Sign Language and other sign systems worldwide have confirmed these languages carry every bit of the grammatical complexity, flexibility, and open-ended structure that any spoken language carries, with nothing missing and nothing simplified. Nothing about gesture makes it a lesser cousin of speech, a fallback for when real language isn't available. It's a full communication system in its own right, one that very likely came first in our species and simply got pushed into a supporting role once voice took over as the primary channel for most hearing humans. Even human infants replay this ancient sequence in fast forward today, without anyone deliberately teaching them the order. Long before a baby says a first recognizable word, that baby points at things it wants, reaches toward a parent, waves at a stranger, and shakes its head firmly to mean no. Research tracking infant communication across the first year of life has found that gestures actually predominate over vocal symbols early on, with spoken words only gradually overtaking gesture as the child's vocal apparatus and brain mature together. Every single human being alive today walks through a compressed replay of this same evolutionary sequence in their first 2 years of life, communicating fluently through gesture, facial expression, and sound long before a single recognizable word ever leaves their mouth. Step back, and the real story here isn't that our ancestors lacked language before speech existed. It's that language itself runs far older and stranger than speech does, built first from hands, faces, and raw sound, refined across nearly 2 million years before a lowered larynx and a rewired brain finally gave that language a voice to ride on. Every hunt coordinated in total silence, every child soothed with a touch instead of a word, every warning passed hand to hand instead of mouth to ear across a savanna, built the foundation modern language still stands on today. Whether you're speaking out loud or signing across a room, we didn't learn to communicate the moment we learned to speak. We learned to speak because we had already spent nearly 2 million years learning to communicate through every other channel available to us.